Welcome to the show, the Henry Harrison podcast. Mr. Hugh Massie, Executive Chairman and founder of DNA Behavior. The entrepreneurs in business and finance is our topic always. And so we're very fortunate to have Hugh on the podcast because he is a repeat entrepreneur. Welcome and hello, Hugh.
Yeah, great to be with you, Henry. I'm really excited for the discussion.
Well, you have had a long career, different ventures. I know you're mostly focused now on DNA Behavior full time
Yep.
because you're the executive chairman and founder, but you also have a venture capital company. You founded a wealth management company, and you had a good solid 10 years in Arthur Andersen, a major international accounting firm. So, and you're very involved in the Entrepreneurs Organization, which I'm a member of, and actually in international leadership, which I never made it that high into leadership. And we have some mutual friends and just talked about one before we joined on the call. So it's a warm circle all the way from Australia to Atlanta to EO, and here we are.
Well, it's a interconnected world globally, nowhere to hide anymore, Henry.
Right. There you go. So tell us what you're doing now, because this is a fascinating company, and you were on cutting edge of some things long before people were talking about quite a lot of this. In 2001, you founded this, and I've heard it talked about more and more as time is going on, but not as much in 2001. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, so DNA Behavior, if I just talk about that just to get started, is a behavioral data analytics company, and we've built our own psychometric system like like there's DISC and StrengthsFinder and Colby and other types of tools, Myers-Briggs out there to measure not only a person's talents or their strengths, but also how they deal with money. And that was really, this came out of me having a wealth management firm where I wanted to be able to hyper personalize the experience for all of my clients. And so that was really, that's where and why DNA Behavior got started. It was really around personalization and me wanting to help people become financially self-empowered. And I knew that that was going to be about helping them optimize their talents, but also their financial behavior. So for me, wealth management wasn't just about, okay, here's a great investing strategy. It was about understanding the person first and what would be important for them in terms of their whole life. And then the money in a way follows. And I think that's probably where I've been, one of the areas where I've been at the cutting edge. The other part is just in this whole field today of behavioral economics that's getting talked a lot about, which didn't as much in 2001 when I started the business. But, I knew people had decision-making biases. But because we're each different, we have different types of biases or different levels of the same bias. If we talk about loss aversion, well, everybody's got loss aversion, but it's not in a 2-to-1 ratio to making the opportunity to make gains, as has been documented in key research. It's different for all of us. And that would be true, Henry, for all the biases. And, what I realized was that when people are under pressure, normally caused by money and relationships, they revert to their natural, hardwired, instinctive behavior. And I saw clients having these behavioral flips. I'd be at a cocktail party or a fairly easygoing meeting in the office. I'd see one set of behaviors. Under pressure, I'd see a different set of behaviors and decisions getting made. And I thought, I need to know that. And, when I had my aha moment, when someone asked me what was I passionate about, and I just automatically from my subconscious said, I want to help people become financially self-empowered. After a little reflection, I realized that this was behavior. And also it would meet my personalization goal that I just mentioned. So that's sort of the journey in, but that's also what we're doing today, except, the difference today between now and 24 years ago when we started, people had to complete a profile. And in those days, 24 years ago, it took 30 minutes. With the same profile, we managed to reduce the time to 10.5 minutes because of technology and making it slicker. But still, it's a friction. People have to do it. And this time, 2 years ago, I was running our annual team building meeting with the leadership team. And I said, what if we change our goals? And what if we have 1 billion people in our database? What does this look like? At the time, we had about 2.5 million. So this is a big quantum leap in some ways. And the answer was AI. And so we all looked at each other and said, okay, then we've got to build a digital scan. How can we have the profile completed automatically without people having to do it? And we had built the model for that about in 2017, but never deployed it. And partly technology, also because of the client we were working with at the time, didn't want to proceed. But we dusted it off and essentially reverse engineered our own system. It took us, a little while to do that. And then this year, we've got 275 million people in the database. Like we have humanized or behavioralized data on 275 million people globally, and that number will increase. And so, I suppose part of this is, as an entrepreneur, being able to or prepared to challenge your own thinking, business model, explore new possibilities. And that's what we did. And so that pushes us more as a company that's, far less about what I call consulting, team building, advisor coaching, because a lot of our clients are in wealth management, to being about behavioral data. And that behavioral data is really what's important for helping organizations transform. So that's the big shift in our business. So it's, and that's where I would say it's behavioral intelligence. How do we use behavioral data alongside traditional demographic transactional type data for better effect? So
I saw on your website, dnabehavior.com, on one of the videos, it looks like there's a dashboard. Am I right? There's a dashboard for management to look at what's going on with individuals, and maybe for individuals to look at what's going on with themselves and to
yeah,
compare that to the greater spectrum of what's going on in the whole
right.
ecosystem. Yeah.
So what you're seeing there is like really like a heat map. So the starting point for this doesn't matter what size the business is, this can be done, is to start with the CEO or the leader of the business, then the leadership team. And in the ideal world, they would complete a profile taking 10.5 minutes and learn all about their DNA, their talents, their money attitudes, how they want to be communicated with. But we can digitally scan them. I did this with a senior leadership team the other night with a firm with 15,000 advisors in it. I had the CEO, COO, and head of product on the phone, and we did the exercise and digitally scan them. And then I showed them how we could heat map the whole organization by knowing the behavior of every advisor, going across to the clients and understanding, how the advisors are matched up to the clients to build more effectiveness. Where should the leads go? And that's this is what can be done now, as opposed to imagine you have to get 15,000 profiles done just on an advisor's network, or even 20, right? And then maybe, get 1,000 clients profiled. It's quite a fair effort. That's the old model. The new model now is this can be done digitally, and it does, I think, as you're alluding to, it provides a fairly interesting picture of the company through the lens of all the people in the ecosystem, whether they're employees, advisors, or clients. And so that's the game changer for us, but I think also
So
for,
give me a real life story. It's funny. We had a speaker that I listened to. I'm reading his name, Nero Sabanathan. He's one of the most well-known professors at London School of Economics and
yeah,
organizational behavior. And he quotes some people recently that, not fairly recently, won the Nobel Prize for testing how irrational people are when they make decisions,
yeah,
and how marketers are able to figure that out. And they have something called a decoy product, which they insert or offer, which just makes the other product look better so that
yeah,
people don't feel like they're paying too much, and
yeah,
how irrational we all are as hard as it is to say, with some of our decision making. So compare, maybe I just happen to hear him speak, so it seems relevant. You must know a lot about the people that are studying, behavioral
Well,
organizational science.
yeah, I'm doing more and more in that area because I also do a podcast. I've started a podcast, the Behavioral Economics Today podcast, where I've been interviewing, just like you're doing with me, people like him that have done some cutting edge research on some theory or on a practice. And I think that where the world's got to is that with behavioral biases, that research sort of been done. Okay, some of the same biases are getting new names, but it's essentially the same work. It's come to it can't go any further in a way because we know what the biases are, but they've been applied on a one size fits all basis. And not that the next path is now, and like what you're just referring to there with pricing, that's being delivered on a one size fits all type basis, assuming that we're all equally irrational or rational or semi-rational, however you want to put it. But I think the holy grail that we're getting to now that can be conquered is if we understand who the person is, then the presentation of those options can be changed to reflect that person and what the deal or the opportunity being sold is. For some people, they'll see the lifestyle benefit in it, or others are going to, focus more on their retirement and security with it. Others, is talk about their goals, or so whatever is being offered, the presentation of that can be customized to the person. They will still have to select between one of the three options. Companies can't change everything, but they can change how it's presented to bring people to the table. And I think that's the future of, behavioral, that's the future of behavioral economics, whether it's in a financial planning, wealth management setting, or even like I was interviewing some people the other day, a person the other day in Switzerland. That can be done if you're trying to change the behavior of people driving their car versus public transport up a ski mountain, right? If you understand the person better, then all the reasons that you give them to get the train instead of the drive a car can be presented in the way they need to hear it to make a decision.
Do you have any story about a specific client and maybe something that is measurable that they can say, "Boy, we're sure glad that we got involved with you and your company"?
Yeah. So if I used a business owner story, and there's a lot of them, but one would be that probably both you and I, having been in EO for a while, would reconcile to. The business starts, and two guys were at university together and did engineering. They come up with this product idea. They decide to, once they finish their degree, to go and, build a business together. One's more sales driven, what I call stronger willed as a personality. The other one's more operational into the execution. You'd probably call that an integrator, if you want to call it that. But they both, they're partners in the business. They get the revenue to about 5 million. And one of them, the salesperson, visionary guy, wants to really expand the business. He can see how, okay, we've got traction now. Let's really push this thing along. But it's going to require financing. And you then start talking about, okay, how are we going to get the financing? We're going to get a bank loan. So they go to the bank, and because that's better than getting an equity injection. And at the end of the day, one of them, being the more operational execution person who's more security focused, got a higher loss aversion or a higher, lower risk tolerance, didn't want to sign the personal guarantee. And then he's got his wife also barking in his ear about it, and the other person's wife has got something to say about it. So, you've got an entanglement there where one is ready to accelerate and is prepared to take those risks, and the other one not. And it causes a war in the business. And, like they started arguing with each other, about almost everything. I suppose these things happen. People start seeing the worst in each other. There's squabbles, there's conflicts. But when they went through our instruments, the psychometric profiling, they now saw each other's strengths and where this was coming from. And they found ways to deal with it. And they made some adjustments between themselves. They dealt with the financier because at the end of the day, they could now see how each was wired. And deep down, they had a fundamental love and respect for each other. But it couldn't be the same financial arrangement anymore. But they both got to that place where they could be happy and their needs addressed. And so that's the good of it, because I think that it flushes out. This is who each other naturally is. It's not, in a way, it's not their fault. They're operating in their strengths, but there's a consequence. And I think that's a clear case of, Henry, where we're looking at talent, but we're also looking at the money behaviors, because they're almost inseparable. I think that money is infused into everything, the energy of money, and it has to be understood and dealt with. That's one concrete case for.
That's a nice study. So yeah, that's what as you said, you have many of those cases, and it's nice to hear one specifically. So your clients, this is software, right?
Yeah.
You are a SaaS provider. You have this wide network of people that have been scanned. When you say scan, what does that mean?
So there's two levels that
A very wide network, like millions of people. So I don't want to
yeah.
understate that. Yeah.
So just to be really concrete for the listeners, there's sort of two ways to have your behavioral style revealed. One is, which is the traditional way, which we started, is completing a profile, taking 10 minutes. Like I could send you the link, you spend 10 minutes, 10 and a half minutes is the average, completing it, answering the questions, and then you get back all the reports.
Yeah.
The scanning process is, if we know your name, the company you work at, and your role, so we can put an identifier on you, we can now feed that through prompts out to public data sources to pick up a whole lot of information about you, including your work history, career history, things that you've said, done out there, in the public data sources. And that brings back the information to complete the questionnaire. And the real difference is just level of accuracy. If you do it yourself, it's 97% accurate. If you have the digital scan do it, it's somewhere at the moment between 70 and 75% accurate for most people. For some, it's higher. We don't need a lot of information. There doesn't need to be a lot out there for it to be done. Even my wife is being digitally scanned, and she hasn't worked in 16 years. But we know Jennifer's, what she does now, but we also know what her career path was. And, I think that the fact is there's more information out there on all of us than you would realize. So that's where we're able to do the digital scan. And I think it's really to get a head start and start removing some of the frictions in understanding people, being more pinpointed in your sales and marketing, how you onboard a client, or how you deal with a worker downstream in your business. Maybe expose a problem. That's, what it's for. But a really high stakes decision or situation, like the business partner situation I just described, I'd make them do the profile at the end of the day, because you want the most accurate information.
Sure, sure. And I can imagine, just thinking that you mentioned wealth management companies, they're going to be wanting to understand the customers and what those customers' goals are, so they can structure, I mean, this is a high level, but their risk, while even having them identify all financial advisors want to do this. What's the long-term goal? And what about your kids? And what about college?
Yeah.
And what about your house? And what about your vacations? And then what about your job or company or risk, and tying that all together? But I guess using AI and using the scan and using the form, I guess you call it, the questionnaire, you're going to be able to provide them some kind of dashboard that's superior than just sitting in a conference room and having coffee. And
Yeah, I think you get to that place of more pinpointed understanding far earlier, which allows you to engage with the person. Because, I'm sure you've been in a conversation like I have, and you just start communicating the way you normally do because you're wired that way, and you completely miss the mark with the person. And in a way, there's not a level of trust has not been built enough for them to want to do something with you. At the end of the day, probably you can connect with 40% of the people that you interact with at some level, a good enough level. there's a 60% complete black hole. And that would be true for, any salesperson dealing with a prospect and client base or a territory, advisors dealing with their client base. They connect with some of the clients, but not all of them. They're getting more engagement out of some, and I think you'll find comes down to communication. But why not get engagement out of everybody? And what then the system does is helping you see where and who and how to adapt that communication and understand maybe some of the deeper motivations.
So you moved to Atlanta. I went to college in Atlanta, Emory
Yeah.
University. Great town, dynamic business city. And you mentioned your leadership team. Is everybody in Atlanta or different parts of the world or working remote, or how are you set up?
Yeah, so we've got some of the key leaders are in Atlanta, and I think going forward there will be more with the recruiting plan that we've got for next year and the year after. There will be more executives based in Atlanta, but we've got operational teams in 4 different countries right now. We've got sort of the UX development of our software system and apps that get built there in Pakistan, believe it or not. Database work's done in India, and then we've got a really good analytics team actually in Sri Lanka. The team there, they've all been educated in the UK, and they're excellent. And we've got some in the Philippines, and then we've got some executives also like in Australia and other places to run a market or run a distribution type network. But we've got to keep a balance of all of that, of who is remote versus who's in Atlanta. But I think I'd be building more of the team up in Atlanta in the future, maybe than other parts of America, just because of culture building. I think what I've realized is that if the people can be a little closer to me, it's not that I want to micromanage them, but it's sharing the culture. And we're doing more and more of that work actually online as well. Even this morning, we took half an hour with the team and we went through some aspects of the product and why those features are there and how they're used, so that they're getting more cultural indoctrination. Because I've realized, Henry, this is the key to the growth, is having everybody completely bought into the culture. And our culture is being built on what we call a know, engage, and grow culture. So, knowing people, engaging them, and growing them, that works with a behavioral assessment, human capital type business. But the real key thing, the difference in our secret sauce, is the fact that we encourage the sharing of profiles. So when I started with the profile system in the wealth management business, because I developed it sort of out of that, my promise was that I would always share my profile first with any client or prospect before I asked them to do it, to be transparent. And sort of the leaders go first principle, that's the same in the team. And you would see my profile everywhere. I've got to be 100% authentic and vulnerable. And today, when I meet, even if it's a CEO of a large company that we'd love to have as a client, if he or she says, well, I'm not going to do my profile or I'm not going to share it, then I say, we're not going to serve you, right? We're not going to serve the company. And we expect this to happen. And what I've seen is the clients that have been with us for 20 years, because they're quite a number, and obviously we've accumulated more clients since, the ones that stayed the course have always done that. That was why they bought into the company. And that's what we need to reinforce. And that's what I need to keep reinforcing with our team, in demonstrating it and them seeing the power of that. So that's, I think, a pretty important point. But I think this is important for all entrepreneurs building their company, is to really get back to the culture and why are you different. It's not just, oh, we have great employee engagement or great client engagement or a great tool. There's something that is there deeper down that needs to be protected. Vern Harnish refers to it as the soul of your company. That's the thing I'm talking about. And
Sure,
our
sure.
goal is about profile sharing, or what we call knowing me, knowing you.
Saw him yesterday too, along with the
Yeah.
others.
Well, he's out and about everywhere.
He's everywhere. You can't walk outside without bumping into him.
Yeah.
So clients onboarding, they want your tool. What's your range of client sizes? One man shop, probably not, but 10 men to 1,000
Yeah,
or
the
20,000 people?
we've got so our client base is sort of split into two. So we've got the wealth management, financial services, insurance channel, and there we've got financial advisory firms or firms from 5 people all the way up to say Fidelity Investments. That type of or that and then it's some of the big broker dealers, other insurance firms. So we've got them fund management companies, some pretty big ones. So we've got this going at all ends. I would say the sweet spot for a financial services firm, wealth management, is probably 750 million assets under management up, just because there's a little bit more team there. The business is already established, and this is something that you would infuse in to the business. I'd say everybody should be profiling their clients out the gate and know themselves better. But the reality's been that for many, they've got there's so many things to build a successful firm. They've tended not to do this, but we are putting an app out next year called GoDNA, which is really, I suppose, a mini version of our main system that can just be done from the mobile phone to make this more accessible. It's at a lower cost, so there would be no excuse for the one-man band firm not to do it. And then on the other side, we have clients outside financial services from, US government clients down to Intel, going down to, your 5 and 10 person entrepreneurial business.
It is interesting too. You brought up, so there's something called verify your badge on LinkedIn, and I was going to do that. I hadn't gotten around to it. And then I realized I got to put my driver's license to LinkedIn. And we're in an area where privacy is an interesting thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I imagine there's some people that's why they react. They're they're not willing to be as openly authentic.
I think that's an issue, and I think a lot of people are worried out there. Well, what does Big Brother know about me? What's going to be done? I've just clicked on looking at something at Amazon, to buy a new shirt or a golf club or something, and suddenly I've got all the Facebook ads are following me around. I mean, that's out there. But in terms of what we do, one, DNA behavior holds no what I call detailed personal information, financial information, age, driver licenses, passports, nothing that's considered private in that sense in our databases, and we don't need it to produce the profile. We're doing it totally on, who you are as a person or a personality, and that's not built from how much money you've got, for example, or your age, or where you live, or anything like that, or what your healthcare insurance is. That's all information that those sort of firms might hold and then add our data, behavioral data to it to create a more detailed script. But I think for those that are not willing to share it, the fact is there's so much out there now. There's no point hiding in this area. And I said that to a CEO the other day. I said, okay, if you don't want to do this, it's still out there anyway. I can digitally scan you and I know who you are. And really what came of that, though I've said that a little bluntly, by presenting him with the digital scan, he actually said, Hugh, that's pretty accurate. I'd like to do the full process
Yeah.
and I want to share it. I think that some of it is also bedside manner of how all of this is done.
And as you say, with the successes, which is really, I mean, more information about what your own goals are, what your own wants are, to be a better person, to help people around you, to grow your business, to make more money, whatever, philanthropy. And then for your employees or your company's employees to have the benefit of that as well. And then for the company to try to better match them up. I mean, it all makes good common sense
Yep.
that it's really helpful. It's like spending time having coffee, but it's in addition to that. And so it really is a positive thing. But sometimes there's an initial reaction of, well, am I going to be judged or is this going to be used against me?
Well, I think that that's the problem is that there are organizations where, a profiling tool suddenly being brought in, or a leadership 360 tools, but suddenly being, someone suddenly been introduced for someone, and in a way it's being used as a tool to exit them. There has been a lack of trust, and that doesn't help. But that's also, I think that's the opportunity that I've been saying is, if you do want to build trust in your organization and a culture of psychological safety, then it's got to start at the top. And all those issues that you're alluding to will be there if the CEO doesn't start it. That's just a fact. It doesn't matter whether it's a 5-person company or a 5,000 or 100,000 person company. It all starts at the top, and that sets the tone. So, but the tools shouldn't be used in a destructive way internally.
Yeah. And I guess really information is information, so it can be used for good or bad
Yeah.
pretty much anywhere at any time. So it's really, and as they say, if everybody's authentic and trying to create win-wins, then it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
And that's the goal. And I think that we have to keep working towards that. We all talk about it, and we all talk about, authenticity from the leadership level, talk about building a better employee experience and client experience. It's a matter of how far are you prepared to go to do it.
So you're kind of, it's an interesting mix, right? You are in the software business and you're in the people business.
Yeah.
And you, to me, seem like a people person. I know I have friends that are brilliant in some areas, and they say, "Oh, well, people is not my best thing." So growing up, were you a people person? I mean, is this something you thought, "Oh, I want to do something with people"? Because I would say if you were going to profile, probably, some accountants would say, "Oh, I'm better with numbers than I am with people." And you had an accounting background, so you've
If
got a
you,
diverse.
yeah, if you look at my DNA profile and look at it closely, you would say Hugh is probably pretty squarely a numbers results orientated person. My mother, who brought me up, would definitely say that was the case when I was younger. The entrepreneurial spirit was there from being a little boy. The time I started playing with Lego, the ideas, Henry, were all there to do something. I think that the working in the accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, was something I did because I was also brought up with the belief of getting a meal ticket, go and get experience and training. And I did that. And it was a wonderful experience. And I could have seen myself going all the way there, and going further than I did. But I think it got to a time when the entrepreneurial spirit was burning. I was already doing deals on the side, and I had to make a decision. I think the culture had changed a fair bit, and so I knew there was a day for me to leave, even though I could have gone a lot further. And and so I stepped out to then set up the wealth management firm, family office. We also did venture capital deals. That type of thing was all, part of that business. And that was probably pretty much the numbers side of the game. But as I started to realize more about who I was, what had made me successful, and I started to see that there wasn't psychological safety at Arthur Andersen. Okay, I need to have that in my business. So I need to work on strategies for that. Personalization was part of my secret sauce when I was delivering tax advice, because I could learn to pick different people intuitively and thought, for this person in the organization's asked me the question, they're going to read a letter, they're going to need to read the advice in a 2-page summary with a diagram, and this person needs to read the 50 pages of research. I figured those things out. Because at the end of the day, everybody can provide tax advice. It's about, is the client going to understand it, be comfortable with the decision that they've got to make, and that's really where the value comes. So intuitively, I figured those things out. So I was reasonably good in Arthur Andersen. I led training for the tax area in Australia at a pretty young age, and I think I was reasonably good at dealing with people. I learned it because I got told a few years before I became more in the management role that, with you, if that's, and I was in Singapore, so I'd moved from Sydney to Singapore for a year. if that's how, if that's how you're going to treat the locals, I wasn't rude, but I was just more demanding, then you're not going to get promoted. So I had to work on empathy, how I connected. It's a big life lesson in that. And because it was in the way of my goals, right? So I learned. And I think then when I got to the behavioral profiling part, it gave me a pathway to see, okay, I'm results driven, but this is where I need to adapt to be more approachable. And, it's a continuous work in progress, Henry. And I had some mentors with it. And, we had a person in the business that was somewhat a coach. She helped. Not only did she help me build the system, but she also, or one part of it, but she also helped, me manage myself and everybody else. And so I think that's where the people part of me's come out. And it's a value set that, I think people deserve to be treated as humans with understanding, acceptance, and respect. But also, if you don't do it, it's going to be in the way of your success. So you got to do it.
Sure, sure.
Whichever
That's
way but be authentic as well. There's no point me not being myself. I have to accept, you know.
well, you can,
uh,
I mean, there's an intentionality to everything. I think everybody is felt annoyed and impatient sometimes because of something that's going on in their life.
yeah.
And but they may be interacting with someone, and the point is, don't take it out on that person. Be polite and say thank you. And if you're agitated, say sorry, I'm a little agitated today. I appreciate your help, or whatever. So, yeah, there's an intentionality to being a good person, if you want to call it simply that. Being compassionate, even if at that moment you're in a agitated state.
I think compassion is something that's important for leadership, along with, having the courage to do the right thing. I think, which is sort of more character related. You do need accountability. I think that being a leader that shapes up in knowing how to manage results and relationships, that's really the key, is consistently managing that tension. Doesn't mean it needs to be a soft working environment, but it doesn't need to be a roughhouse one either. And I think that's the key thing. People need to feel empowered. That as I've learned from Stephen Covey at a conference a couple of weeks ago, people need to know that you believe in them, and then you give them the tools and resources to go and do it. But then set them up for success. Don't have them doing stuff that they're not got the talent to do or the skill sets to do. But you lay the right foundations down, and then you believe in them. And it's amazing what can be achieved. I got that stunning result in our business a few weeks ago with a younger guy that stepped up because somebody else left, and he's designed a new app for us, in under a week. And in the past, that would have taken months and if not longer, and fluffing around. He did it. And it just shows what can be done.
And your business can help other businesses do that. So if they wanted to reach out, they'd go to the website.
Yeah. The best thing is to go to the website, have a look around, and anybody can, get in contact with me either through LinkedIn, Hugh Massie in LinkedIn in Atlanta. So there's only one of me to find, other than my 13-year-old son. So, but he's not in LinkedIn yet, but he's also called Hugh. But yeah, so go onto the website or just send me an email at hugh.massie@dnabehavior.com, and we go from there.
Hey, well, fantastic. Well, really admire hearing about you and admire you for building that company, and for thanks for coming on the show. And I think people will love it. And I think hopefully you'll have some more people that want to come be helped by your business.
Thank you, Henry. I enjoyed spending time with you and look forward to getting to know you better, as the years go by.
Absolutely. Thank you.